Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering companies surrender as DEI gets blown into oblivion. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from the Associated Press, as diversity, equity, and inclusion comes under legal attack, companies quietly alter their programs. And from Forbes, is DEI officially dead? Well, no, it's not officially dead, but it's definitely dying. It's lost its momentum, and companies are running scared from the lawsuits. Sophia Danner-Okotie has ambitious plans for her Nigerian-inspired clothing line, but a sense of dread has punctured her optimism as she watches a legal battle being waged against a small venture capital firm that provided funding instrumental to her boutique brand's growth. The case against the Fearless Fund, and those are the people financing her, alleges that one of its grant programs discriminates against non-black women and asks the courts to imagine a similar program designed only for white applicants. It is among a growing list of lawsuits against corporate diversity and inclusion programs that are making their way through the courts this year. 2024 is the big year for pushing back on diversity, equity, and inclusion. A lot of precedents are going to be set this year. And companies know it's illegal. They're not going to be able to keep doing it. Most lawsuits have been filed by conservative activists encouraged by the Supreme Court's June ruling ending affirmative action in college admissions and are now seeking to set a similar precedent in the working world. The battle has been a roller coaster of setbacks and victories for both sides, but some companies are already retooling their diversity programs in the face of legal challenges and the growing expectation that the conservative-dominated Supreme Court will eventually take up the issue. One conservative activist, Christopher Rufo, claimed another victory this month with the resignation of Harvard's first black woman president, Claudine Gay, after allegations of plagiarism and a furor over her congressional testimony about anti-Semitism. Rufo, who has cast Gay's appointment to the job as the culmination of diversity and inclusion efforts that have sidelined conservative voices in higher education, vowed on Twitter not to stop until we have abolished DEI ideology from every institution in America. Dozens of prominent companies have already been targeted, as well as a wide array of diversity initiatives, including fellowships, hiring goals, anti-bias training, and exclusive contract programs for minority or women-owned businesses, which is to say, you don't even get a chance to get a business contract unless you're a certain gender, race, sexual preference, or combination of those things. Regular people aren't allowed to apply. Some challenges have focused on policies adopted after the 2020 protests over George Floyd's death, as companies pledged more efforts to redress racial inequalities in the workplace. But others have targeted decades-old diversity programs that anti-affirmative action advocates have long tried to dismantle. Diversity and inclusion experts say the legal backlash is already having a chilling effect over corporate efforts to address workplace inequality, at a time when investment and interest in such initiatives have already slowed, as it's been a couple of years since George Floyd, and even the companies don't seem to care as much anymore. Job openings for diversity officers in similar positions have declined in recent months. The combined share of venture capital funding for businesses owned by Black and Latino women has dipped back to less than 1% after briefly surpassing that threshold at 1.05% in 2021 following a jump in 2020, according to the nonprofit advocacy group Digital Undivided. The case against the Fearless Fund, which provides early-stage funding to businesses led by women of color, exemplifies the unpredictable legal landscape. In late September, a federal judge in Atlanta refused to block a Fearless Fund grant contest for black women business owners only, saying they are donations protected by the First Amendment and the lawsuit was likely to fail. But days later, a 3-judge federal appeals panel suspended the contest, calling it racially exclusionary, and saying the suit was likely to succeed. Quote, "Am I going to be able to apply to grants like these? Are they even going to exist?" said Danner-Okotie, who received $10,000 from a separate Fearless Fund grant. With this last ruling, it seems like no. Now, a grant is not an investment. A grant is free money. So should she apply for a free grant? Sure, just fill out the paperwork. It doesn't cost anything. There are multiple ways that business owners, especially small business owners, can get grants. Sometimes you can get an angel investor. You can do a Google search saying, how can I get grants for my small business? Do a little homework, fill out some paperwork. You might be able to get a grant. But to depend on something like that is not a good idea because a grant is just free money. If you need an investor for your business, that's a little bit of a different story. But yeah, it's hard to have your own small business. Danner-Okotie first saw the potential for scaling her clothing brand when the COVID-19 pandemic shut down the boutiques and fairs that carried her designs. Searching for ways to increase her online sales, she landed a contract with subscriber-based retailer Stitch Fix and used a government pandemic relief loan to fulfill the order. But when she tried to build on that success, she ran into roadblocks as banks declined her loan applications, deeming her business model risky since her clothes are handmade by Nigerian tailors. Danner-Okotie said the grant was a game changer, allowing her to contract a factory in India to make uniquely designed fabrics for her team of tailors in Nigeria. But again, a grant is free money, it's not a loan. Sometimes you can't get free money to make investments in your business. Sometimes you have to save the money, sometimes you do have to find an investor. And sometimes you just can't get the money. That's the same thing that everyone else goes through as we run small businesses. But now, future funding from the program is in jeopardy. The lawsuit against the Fearless Fund is being brought by the American Alliance for Equal Rights, a nonprofit founded by anti-affirmative action activist Edward Blum, the man behind the college admission cases in the Supreme Court that he won. The outcome of the case could be a bellwether for similar diversity programs. Oral arguments in the case are scheduled for January 31st, so she would like to get more free money. I don't blame her for wanting to get more free money for her business or for any other purpose, but that really isn't how the economic system normally works anyway. Faced with a messy legal landscape, companies are being cautious. Most major companies have stuck by diversity initiatives that many ramped up in the face of pressure from some shareholders, employees, and customers. Starbucks and Disney are among companies that have so far prevailed in court against challenges to their inclusion programs. But some have made changes to diversity programs to try to protect them from legal scrutiny. Among those are two prominent law firms that had faced lawsuits by Blum's group. The firms Morrison Forrester and Perkins Coie opened their diversity fellowship programs to all applicants of all races in October, changes the company said were in the works before Blum's lawsuits, which he subsequently dropped. In February, pharmaceutical giant Pfizer dropped race-based eligibility requirements for a fellowship program designed for college students of Black, Latino, and Native American descent, even though a judge had dismissed a lawsuit against the program just 2 months earlier. Despite the change, the conservative nonprofit suing Pfizer is appealing the lawsuit's dismissal, arguing that fellowship's goals remain the same. In May, Comcast said business owners of all backgrounds would be eligible to apply for a grant program originally intended for women and people of color when it launched in 2020. Comcast settled a lawsuit last year over the program brought by the conservative Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty on behalf of the white owner of a commercial cleaning business. The Wisconsin Institute filed another lawsuit in October, this one on behalf of two construction firms. The lawsuit seeks to dismantle the U.S. Department of Transportation's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, which dates back to the Reagan administration and requires that 10% of funds authorized for highway and transit federal assistance programs be expended with small businesses owned by women, minorities, or other socially and economically disadvantaged people. Dan Lennington, an attorney with the Wisconsin Institute, said he considers Comcast changes progress, but the anti-affirmative action movement is looking for a broader victory that could change case law on workplace diversity programs, and the lawsuit against the Department of Transportation has that potential. The Supreme Court's ruling on affirmative action opened up a whole new world, Lennington said. This decision really injected new life into the whole debate. Many of the lawsuits challenging diversity programs, including the cases against Pfizer and the Fearless Fund, are relying on a section of the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which prohibits racial discrimination in contract agreements. The law was originally intended to protect formerly enslaved people, but conservative activists are citing it to challenge programs designed to benefit racial minorities. Their lawsuit generally targets programs that have clear race-based eligibility components. A more difficult challenge is proving that companies are making hiring decisions based on race, said David Glasgow, executive director of the Meltzer Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging at New York University's School of Law. Taking race into account for hiring or promotions is illegal under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. A debate has emerged about whether companies are crossing the line by announcing goals for increasing Black and other minority representation. Companies say such efforts are not quotas but aspirational goals they will try to achieve through policies like widening candidate pools and rooting out bias in hiring processes. But of course, it is a quota system. And the quota system is what gets these companies sued and what forces them to change their policies. Glasgow called it a gray area that could depend on a court's interpretation of corporate policies. He said it could be hard to prove discrimination just because a company announced in a really broad way that it would be nice to have more people of color in management. But plaintiffs could try to argue that diversity, equity, and inclusion policies are pressuring hiring managers to make race-based decisions. And there's tremendous amounts of evidence from story to story, company to company, of people being forced to make certain hiring decisions, either based on their own bonuses, their compensation, or keeping their own jobs. Conservative activists are trying to make just that case, seizing on corporate documents that share data on efforts to increase the ranks of Black, Hispanic, and other underrepresented groups in their workforce. However modest that progress might be. America First Legal, a group run by former Trump advisor Stephen Miller, sent a letter in November to the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, seeking an investigation into Macy's efforts to strengthen its DEI policies, arguing they amount to discriminatory hiring practices. In 2019, Macy's announced a goal of 30% ethnic diversity among its leadership at the director level and above by 2025, in part to better serve its customer base, which is about 50% non-white. The retailer launched a leadership training program for selected managers of color, and last year required that candidates for director roles include ethnically diverse applicants. It has also incorporated its DEI goals into annual performance reviews for directors and company-wide incentive calculation. So you will not keep your job. You will not be welcome on the board of directors. You will not get a bonus. These are the kind of threats they are getting directly from company management or from the board of directors to follow their DEI programs and discriminate against people not based on merit, discriminate against people or else. America First Legal cited those initiatives to argue that Macy's has set explicit racial and other quotas for hiring. The group has sent dozens of similar letters to the EEOC, targeting companies from IBM to American Airlines and Hasbro and Mattel, company after company after company. Macy's declined to comment on the letter, but in a previous interview with the Associated Press, outgoing Macy's CEO Jeff Jennett said the company is sticking with its DEI policies while closely watching legal developments. Quote, our enthusiasm and our commitment to all the prongs that we had with DEI and our strategy remains. We might express it differently based on court rulings and in the future, Gannett said, without providing details. Companies are losing the ability to openly discriminate against people based on their skin color, their race, their gender. They're not getting away with it anymore. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.